The rain was pounding against the windows when Marcus Aldridge grabbed his dog by the collar and dragged him toward the back door, his voice thundering through the house as he shouted, "Get out, just get out," and his two children stood frozen in the living room with tears streaming down their faces, their small hands reaching out as if they could stop what was happening, but Marcus didn't look back. He didn't see the way his 8-year-old daughter Harper was sobbing into her sleeve all the way. His 5-year-old son Ethan was clutching his sister's arm like the world was ending, because all Marcus could see in that moment was the destruction around him, the overturned chairs, the shattered vase, the scratched wooden floors, and the terrified look on his children's faces that he had completely misread. So he shoved the golden retriever named Bo out into the cold, slammed the door behind him, and stood there breathing heavily, convinced he had just protected his family from a dog that had finally snapped. But what Marcus didn't know yet, what he couldn't possibly understand in that moment of rage and fear, was that Bo hadn't been attacking anyone. Bo had been trying to save them all, and by the time Marcus would finally realize the truth, it would almost be too late to make things right. Now, to understand how this moment happened, you need to understand who Marcus Aldridge really was, and on the surface, he looked like the kind of man who had everything, a self-made billionaire who had built his tech empire from nothing, a sprawling estate in Connecticut, a beautiful home filled with expensive art and designer furniture, but beneath all of that success was a man who had forgotten how to be present, a man who spent more time in boardrooms than he did at dinner tables, more time on conference calls than bedtime stories, and even though he loved his children more than anything in the world, the truth was he barely knew them anymore. He had nannies and housekeepers and assistants to handle the daily details of parenting while he handled the daily demands of running a billion-dollar company, and somewhere along the way, Marcus had convinced himself that providing for his family meant the same thing as being there for his family. But it didn't, and the one who seemed to understand that more than anyone was Bo, the golden retriever that Marcus's late wife had brought home just 2 weeks before she passed away from a sudden illness 3 years ago, and Bo had become everything to Harper and Ethan. He was their protector, their comfort, their constant companion. He slept outside their bedroom doors every night. He followed them from room to room during the day. He watched over them with a quiet intensity that the staff often joked about, saying things like, "That dog loves those kids more than anything," and it was true. Bo didn't care about Marcus's money or status. Bo only cared about 2 things in this world, Harper and Ethan, and he would do anything to keep them safe, even if no one else understood what he was doing. So on this particular night, everything seemed normal at first. Marcus had come home early from a business trip, which was rare. The kids were playing in the living room while the housekeeper Maria prepared dinner in the kitchen. Marcus had retreated to his home office to take one more call because there was always one more call, and Bo was lying near the fireplace, eyes half closed, just watching the kids the way he always did. But then something changed. Bo's ears perked up first, then his nose started twitching, then he lifted his head and stared toward the hallway that led to the basement, and at first no one noticed because the kids were laughing and Maria was clanking pots in the kitchen and Marcus was behind a closed door talking to investors in Tokyo. But Bo noticed something that no human nose could detect yet, and whatever it was, it made him stand up slowly, his body tense, his tail completely still, and then he started pacing, walking toward the hallway, sniffing the air, then walking back to the kids, then pacing again, and Harper looked up and said, "Bo, what's wrong, buddy?" But Bo didn't come to her for pets like he usually would. Instead he started whining, a low anxious sound that he almost never made. And then he walked to the basement door and started scratching at it, and Maria came out of the kitchen and said, "Bo, stop that, you're going to ruin the door." But Bo didn't stop. He scratched harder. He started barking, short sharp barks that echoed through the house, and Maria tried to pull him away but he wouldn't budge, so she went to get Marcus because she didn't know what else to do. Marcus came out of his office already irritated because his call had been interrupted, and when he saw Bo barking and scratching at the basement door, he assumed the dog was just being disobedient, just acting out for attention the way dogs sometimes do, so he grabbed Bo by the collar and said, "That's enough, enough," and he tried to lead Bo away from the door, but Bo pulled free and ran straight to the children, and this is where everything went wrong, because Bo started nudging the kids with his nose, hard, trying to push them toward the front door, and Ethan stumbled and fell, and Harper screamed because she didn't understand what was happening. And when Marcus saw his daughter screaming and his son on the ground and the dog standing over them barking, something inside him snapped, something protective and primal but completely misdirected, and he grabbed Bo and pulled him away from the children, shouting, "What is wrong with you? Have you lost your mind?" And Bo was still barking, still trying to get back to the kids, still trying to push them toward the door. And in the chaos, Bo knocked over a side table, and a vase shattered, and chairs got overturned, and Marcus saw his children crying and his house in disarray, and he made a decision that he would regret for the rest of his life. He decided that Bo was dangerous. He decided that Bo had finally snapped. He decided to throw the dog out into the cold October rain and deal with the problem in the morning. And so that's what he did. He dragged Bo to the back door, he shoved him out into the darkness, he slammed the door and locked it, and he stood there catching his breath while his children cried behind him and Bo scratched desperately at the door from outside, and Marcus turned to his children and said, it's okay, Daddy took care of it, the dog won't hurt you anymore. But Harper looked at him with tears in her eyes and said, Daddy, Bo wasn't hurting us. Bo was trying to tell us something. And Marcus dismissed it because he was too angry and too certain that he was right, and he told Maria to take the kids upstairs and get them cleaned up for bed, and he started picking up the broken pieces of the vase, trying to restore order to his perfect house, trying to convince himself that he had done the right thing. But something felt wrong. Even as Marcus cleaned up the mess, even as the house grew quiet, something felt deeply unsettled in his chest, a heaviness that he couldn't explain, and the more he thought about it, the more he kept replaying what had happened, the way Bo had been scratching at the basement door, the way Bo had been trying to push the kids toward the front door, the way Bo's barking had seemed less aggressive and more desperate, like he was trying to communicate something that none of them could understand, and Marcus found himself standing in the hallway, staring at the basement door, wondering why Bo had been so focused on it, and almost without thinking, he walked toward it, and he put his hand on the doorknob, and he opened it, and immediately, he smelled it, a faint but unmistakable odor, the smell of gas, natural gas, leaking from somewhere in the basement. And his blood ran cold because he knew exactly what that meant. He knew that the gas had been building up down there. He knew that if it reached the pilot light of the furnace or if someone had flipped a light switch, the entire house could have exploded, his children could have died, everyone in this house could have died, and suddenly everything made sense. Bo hadn't been acting out. Bo had smelled the gas long before any human could detect it. Bo had been trying to warn them. Bo had been trying to get the children out of the house. Bo had been doing exactly what he had always done, protecting Harper and Ethan with every fiber of his being. And Marcus had punished him for it. Marcus had thrown him out into the cold. Marcus had looked at pure loyalty and called it danger, and the realization hit him so hard that he had to brace himself against the wall to keep from falling. He immediately called the gas company and the fire department, and within an hour there were emergency vehicles in his driveway and technicians in his basement confirming what he already knew, a major gas leak from a corroded pipe. They told him he was lucky. They told him if this had gone undetected for another hour or two, the outcome could have been catastrophic, and Marcus just stood there nodding, barely hearing their words because all he could think about was Bo. All he could see was the look in Bo's eyes when he was being dragged toward the door, not angry, not vicious, just desperate, just trying to save the children he loved, and Marcus had responded to that love by throwing him out like he was nothing, and now Bo was out there somewhere in the cold rain, alone, probably confused, probably heartbroken, thinking that he had done something wrong when he had done everything right. The moment the emergency crews cleared out, Marcus grabbed a flashlight and a jacket and he ran into the backyard, calling Bo's name over and over, his voice cracking, the rain soaking through his clothes, and at first there was nothing, just darkness and silence and the sound of his own desperate shouting, and he started to panic. He started to think about all the terrible things that could happen to a dog alone in the dark, and he ran further into the property, toward the tree line at the edge of his estate, still calling Bo's name, and then he saw something, a shape huddled beneath an old oak tree, and he ran toward it, and there was Bo, soaking wet and shivering, but the moment Bo saw Marcus, his tail started wagging, not fast and excited, but slow and cautious, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be happy, like he wasn't sure if he was still in trouble, and that slow, uncertain wag broke something inside Marcus. Because this dog, this incredible, loyal, loving dog, had just saved his children's lives, and he was still worried about whether Marcus was mad at him, and Marcus fell to his knees in the mud and he wrapped his arms around Bo and he said, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't understand, I didn't listen," and he just held that dog and cried like he hadn't cried since his wife's funeral, letting all the guilt and the grief and the gratitude pour out of him at once. When Marcus walked back into the house with Bo at his side, Harper and Ethan came running down the stairs, and they threw their arms around Bo and buried their faces in his wet fur, and Bo's tail finally started wagging for real, that big, sweeping golden retriever wag that meant everything was okay, and Marcus watched his children hold onto the dog that their mother had brought home, the dog that had watched over them every day since she passed, the dog that had just risked everything to keep them safe, and he understood something in that moment that no business deal or board meeting had ever taught him. He understood that loyalty doesn't always look the way you expect it to. Sometimes loyalty looks like chaos, sometimes loyalty looks like disobedience, sometimes the ones who love us the most are the ones trying to warn us about dangers we can't even see. And if we're too proud or too distracted or too certain of our own judgment to listen, we might push away the very things we should be holding on to. In the days that followed, Marcus made changes, real changes, not just promising to be more present but actually doing it, cutting back his hours, cancelling trips, sitting on the floor with his kids and Bo, learning to pay attention to the small things he had been missing for years, and he never forgot what Bo did that night. He had a plaque made and hung it by the back door, the same door he had once shoved Bo through, and the plaque simply said he tried to tell us, and every time Marcus walked past it, he was reminded that sometimes the ones who can't speak are the ones we should listen to the most. Now I have to ask you something, and I really want you to think about it. If you were in Marcus's position, if you saw your dog acting wild and your children crying and your house in chaos, would you have stopped long enough to ask why, or would you have reacted the same way he did? It's easy to judge from the outside, but when fear and confusion take over, it's so hard to see clearly, and maybe that's the lesson here. Maybe the real message is that we should all slow down before we react. We should all consider that the ones acting out might be acting out for a reason. So drop a comment and tell me honestly what you would have done, and if this story moved you, if it made you think about the way we sometimes misunderstand the loyalty right in front of us, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with a parent, share it with a dog lover, share it with anyone who has ever been too quick to judge before understanding. Because stories like this remind us what really matters, not success, not money, not a perfect house, but the ones who love us enough to fight for us, even when we don't understand why.